You think too small, dress too simple, and live too carefully for someone like me, she told me during a rooftop dinner date downtown. I quietly left without defending myself. Nearly a year later, she accidentally ran into me while waiting outside a restaurant she couldn't afford to enter anymore. You think too small, dress too simple, and live too carefully for someone like me. She said it like she was reading a weather forecast. Flat. Certain. Already decided. The table next to us went quiet. A couple near the railing glanced over, then quickly looked away. The skyline behind her was lit up orange and gold. One of those Manhattan evenings that makes you feel like the city belongs to you. It didn't feel that way anymore. I set my fork down slowly. I didn't argue. I didn't laugh it off. I just looked at her, really looked at her, and realized she wasn't nervous about what she'd said. Not even a little. That was the part that stayed with me. Not the words. The ease. Like she'd been holding that sentence in her mouth for months and was finally relieved to let it go. I picked up my glass, took a slow sip, set it down, and somewhere between that breath and the next one, I made a decision I didn't even fully understand yet. I wasn't going to defend myself. Not tonight. Not ever. I didn't realize it then. But that moment changed everything. Because nearly a year later, she'd be standing outside a restaurant she couldn't even afford to enter anymore, wearing an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Something that looked almost like regret. Almost. The restaurant was called Vantage. Rooftop. 42nd floor. The kind of place where the menu doesn't have prices on it, and nobody asks. It had been Brooke's idea, obviously. Everything that required a reservation 3 weeks in advance was always Brooke's idea. We'd been together almost 3 years at that point. Long enough that I knew which version of her showed up depending on who else was going to be there. That night, it was her friend Cassandra's birthday, which meant the version of Brooke who arrived was the one who performed. She'd spent 40 minutes getting dressed, walked out of the bathroom in a black dress that probably cost more than my monthly electric bill, looked at what I was wearing, dark jeans, clean white shirt, good shoes, and something shifted in her face. Not anger, just disappointment. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't say anything because it's already given up on changing you. You're wearing that. I looked down. What's wrong with it? She picked up her bag. Nothing. It's fine. Fine. That word. I'd learned by then that fine from Brooke meant the opposite. Fine meant, you've already embarrassed me before we've left the apartment. We took an Uber uptown. She texted the whole way. I watched the city slide past the window. Cassandra's group was already there when we arrived. 6 people spread around a corner table, cocktails in hand. That particular brand of easy confidence that comes from never really worrying about money. There was a man named Wesley at the table. Finance. Obviously. The kind of guy who mentions what firm he works for within the first 90 seconds of meeting you, then waits for your reaction like he just handed you something valuable. He was tall, wore a watch I recognized from a magazine I'd once flipped through in a waiting room. Brooke hugged him like they'd known each other longer than I'd been in the picture. Maybe they had. I sat down, smiled when I was supposed to, answered the questions people ask at dinners like that. What do you do? Where do you work? How do you know so-and-so? And watched Brooke slowly tilt toward the other end of the table. Not physically, but in every other way. Her laugh got louder. Her posture changed. She touched her collarbone the way she did when she was enjoying herself. I refilled my water glass and listened to the conversation and told myself I was imagining it. I wasn't imagining it, but I told myself that anyway. Because that's what you do when you're 3 years in and you've confused investment with love. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. I was 29. She was 27. We'd been together almost 3 years. Most of our weekends were quiet dinners, rooftop bars, and pretending we wanted the same future. I worked in architecture. Not the glamorous kind. Not yet. Project coordination, mostly. Long hours. Slow promotions. Work that mattered but didn't photograph well. Brooke worked in brand consulting. She knew exactly how things looked. That was her skill. That was also her problem. The passive stuff started somewhere around year 2. Small things. Easy to dismiss. You're so practical, she said once, when I chose an apartment based on the commute instead of the view. The way she said practical made it sound like a polite word for something she actually found exhausting. Another time we were at a gallery opening her colleague had invited us to. Everyone was dressed like they were auditioning for something. I wasn't. On the cab ride home, she said, you know you can dress for the room sometimes. It's not a betrayal of who you are. I didn't respond. She kept looking out the window. People notice these things. That's all I'm saying. I still didn't respond. She took that as agreement. It wasn't. The comparisons got more frequent after that. Always wrapped in softness. Always with a smile that made it harder to push back. Her friend's boyfriend just got promoted to VP. Did I know how much architects made at the director level? Had I thought about switching to the private sector? One time she mentioned, casually, the way she said everything she actually meant, that Cassandra's ex had driven a Tesla, and it just made things easier, you know? Going places, not thinking about parking. I drove a 4-year-old Civic. It ran perfectly, but that wasn't really the point she was making. At the time, I laughed it off. Now I realized she was testing how much disrespect I would tolerate. She was measuring the ceiling, and I kept making it higher. There was a dinner with her work colleagues somewhere around month 30. I remember it clearly because it was the first time I felt genuinely humiliated in public and said nothing about it. Her colleague Jillian had brought her fiancé, hedge fund, Boston accent, the kind of hands that had never fixed anything. He ordered for the table without asking. Brooke lit up like he'd done something impressive. At one point the conversation turned to travel. Jillian's fiancé was talking about a place in the Maldives. Overwater bungalow. Private chef. He looked at me, the way people do when they're about to include you in something they already know the answer to. You guys travel much? Brooke answered before I could. We keep it pretty low-key. He's more of a stay-close-to-home person. She smiled at me when she said it. The kind of smile that dares you to disagree in public. I smiled back, picked up my drink. Jillian nodded politely. Her fiancé moved on, and the dinner kept going like nothing had happened. But something had happened. I felt it somewhere behind my sternum. That particular warmth of a small, careful humiliation. Later, walking back to the car, I said, I'm not a stay-close-to-home person. You know that. She looked at her phone. I was just keeping the conversation moving. By describing me wrong. Don't make it a thing. I didn't make it a thing. I made it a memory instead. Then came the rooftop. Vantage again. Just the two of us this time. I'd made the reservation. Dressed the way I always dressed. Well, but not performatively. Halfway through the second course, she put her fork down, looked at the skyline, then looked at me. Can I say something honest? Those 4 words. I'd learned to hate those 4 words. Go ahead, I said. I feel like we want different things. I waited. She continued. You're comfortable. I know that sounds cruel, but you're comfortable in a way that feels like settling. And I don't want to settle. I want a life that actually looks like something. Looks like something, I repeated. You know what I mean. I don't think I do. Say it plainly. She met my eyes. You think too small. You dress too simple. And you live too carefully for someone like me. There it was. Someone at the next table put their glass down very quietly. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I looked past her at the city below. 10 million lives stacked on top of each other. Every one of them somebody's definition of not enough. I put my napkin on the table. Stood up. Picked up my jacket. Where are you going? She asked. Home. We haven't finished dinner. I know. She stared at me. Waiting for the argument. Waiting for the defense, the anger, the begging, whatever she'd prepared for. I didn't give her any of it. I just walked to the elevator, pressed the button, rode down 42 floors in silence, and walked out onto the street where the city was loud and indifferent and completely unimpressed by both of us. She called 4 times that night. I let it go to voicemail. Texted once at midnight. We should talk. I read it. Didn't respond. The next morning she texted again. So that's it. You're just going to disappear? I stared at that message for a while. Then I put my phone face down on the kitchen counter and made coffee. And that was it. That was the moment something in me went cold. Not angry cold. Not bitter cold. Just done. Like a door that had been slowly closing for months finally clicked shut. I stopped explaining myself after that night. There was nothing to explain. She'd been clear. I'd heard her. My friend Ross called me 2 days later. He'd heard through Cassandra. They were loosely in the same circle. That Brooke was telling people I'd just walked out for no reason. Ross laughed when he told me. She's leaving out the part where she said what she said. Apparently. You going to correct the record? No. Okay. He paused. You doing all right? Yeah. I meant it. Which surprised me. I kept waiting for the grief to arrive. The chest heavy, can't sleep kind I expected after 3 years. It came, but it was quieter than I thought it would be. More like finishing a book you'd outgrown than losing something you needed. What arrived louder was something else. Focus. I'd been sitting on a project proposal for 8 months. A mixed-use development concept I'd been developing on my own time, residential units, commercial ground floor, green space integration. My supervisor at the firm had looked at it briefly once, nodded, told me to keep refining, which was his way of saying he wasn't ready to push it upstairs. I decided I was done waiting for his timing. I reached out to a former professor who'd moved into development consulting. His name was Hayden. Sharp, mid-50s, the kind of man who's heard every pitch and shows it on his face. We met for coffee. I walked him through the concept. He said nothing for a full minute after I finished. Then, how long have you been sitting on this? 8 months. Why? I didn't have a great answer. Because I was waiting for permission. Because I was spending energy in the wrong direction. Because someone had convinced me I thought too small. I didn't say any of that. I just said, I'm not sitting on it anymore. He smiled. Good. Send me the full deck by Friday. The next 6 months were a different kind of exhausting. The good kind. Early mornings. Late nights. Conversations I'd never had before with people I'd never been in the room with before. Hayden knew people. He made introductions that took other people decades to earn. By month 3, we had a development partner interested. By month 5, we had a site and a preliminary term sheet. I stopped going to the places I used to go, the rooftop bars, the gallery openings, the dinners where everyone performed their best version of themselves. I didn't miss them. Ross noticed. You've gone quiet, he said one evening over a genuinely normal dinner at a corner spot we'd been going to since we were 23. Just busy. Good busy. Yeah. He studied me. You look different. Different how? I don't know. Less like you're trying to prove something. I thought about that. Maybe because I'm not. I heard about Brooke occasionally. Not because I looked. Just because cities are smaller than they pretend to be. Ross mentioned once that she and Wesley had started seeing each other. I felt nothing I could identify clearly. Not hurt. Not satisfaction. Just the dull recognition that some things happen exactly the way you expect them to. A few months later, Ross mentioned, carefully, the way he always delivered news he wasn't sure I wanted, that things with Wesley had apparently ended badly. Something about him being already involved with someone when they started. Which, honestly, didn't surprise me either. I didn't ask for details. Ross didn't offer more. We changed the subject. Around month 8, I ran into Cassandra at a coffee place near my old neighborhood. She looked uncomfortable seeing me. Did the thing people do when they were friends with both halves of a breakup and aren't sure which story they're supposed to honor. How are you? She asked. Good, I said. Really good. She searched my face for evidence that this was a performance. It wasn't. That's great, she said. Then, almost reluctantly, you look well. I smiled. Ordered my coffee. Moved on. The project launched quietly. No announcement. No celebration dinner. No moment where I stood somewhere important and felt the way people in movies feel when things go right. Just an email with final signatures. Then another email introducing me to the construction team. Then a site visit on a gray Tuesday morning where I stood in a muddy lot in Brooklyn and looked at a future that was mine. Hayden clapped me on the shoulder. You built this. I looked at the lot. Not yet. He laughed. Close enough. I started dressing differently. Not because someone told me to. Not to prove anything. Just because the person I was becoming wore different things than the person I used to be. Good fabric. Clean lines. Quiet confidence. Not the kind that announces itself. Ross noticed. My colleagues noticed. Even Hayden noticed. You clean up well, he said once. Almost offhand, after a client dinner. Thanks. I mean it differently than it sounds. You carry yourself differently now. I knew what he meant. I'd stopped waiting for someone else to tell me I was ready. That changes how you stand. The night I ran into Brooke again, I wasn't thinking about her. That matters. I was outside a restaurant called Ember. New place in the West Village, private opening, the kind that doesn't have a sign yet. I was there with Hayden and 2 development partners, Calvin and a woman named Sierra who ran acquisitions for a mid-sized firm out of Chicago. We'd closed the second phase of the project that afternoon. The dinner was ours. I was standing just outside the entrance, finishing a brief phone call, when I heard someone say my name. Not to me. About me. I turned, and there she was. Brooke, standing at the edge of the sidewalk. Different than I remembered. Not worse, not better, just smaller, somehow. The confidence that used to fill a room was still there, but it was working harder than it used to. She was with a man I didn't recognize. They were standing near the host's stand that had been set up outside, the kind of setup that exists to politely tell people without reservations that tonight isn't possible. The hostess was explaining something to them with that practiced, apologetic expression. Brooke was holding her bag the way she held it when she was frustrated and trying not to show it. Our eyes met. She froze. There are moments that don't need narration. This was one of them. The whole thing communicated itself. The restaurant behind me, warm and golden through the glass. The people waiting inside, people she recognized, probably. The host outside, explaining, gently, that the wait list tonight was full. The man beside her who had no idea what he was standing inside of. And me, in a suit that didn't need to announce itself. Calm, unhurried, exactly where I was supposed to be. Her expression moved through 3 or 4 things very quickly. Surprise first, then something that tried to reassemble itself into composure, then something underneath that she couldn't quite control. I finished my phone call, put my phone in my jacket pocket, walked over, not to perform anything, just because walking away would have been its own kind of performance. Hey, I said. Hey. Her voice was careful. You look well. She gave me the smile, the same smile she used to give waiters who brought the wrong order. Thank you. You do too. There was a pause. Her companion looked between us. She didn't introduce him. I didn't ask. Are you coming here? She asked. Heading back in, yeah. Her eyes moved past me to the warm interior. To Hayden and Calvin visible through the glass, easy and unhurried at a corner table. To the life that had been quietly assembling itself while she wasn't watching. We couldn't get a reservation, she said. There was something in her voice when she said it. Not quite asking for anything. Just saying it. Like a sentence that expected a response she already knew wasn't coming. Shame, I said. It's a good night in there. I held her gaze for one more second. Just long enough. Then I nodded. Once. Turned. And walked back inside. Ross asked me about it the next day. He'd somehow already heard. Cities, circles, all of it. How'd it feel, he asked. I thought about it. The honest answer. Like nothing, mostly. He waited. There was like a second. A real second. Where I thought about all of it. And then I went back to my table. Ross nodded slowly. That's it. That's it. He was quiet for a moment. She reached out. You know, he said. I looked at him. When, last night, late, messaged me asking how you were doing. What you were working on. I looked out the window. Traffic. Gray sky. Same city it always was. What did you say? Ross smiled. I said you were good. Really good. That's all. That's all she needed to know. She texted me 6 days later. I don't know how she got the number. Same number, actually. Never changed it. The message was simple. It's Brooke. I saw you the other night. I hope things are going well. I've been thinking. The message stopped there, trailing off like she wasn't sure how to finish it. I read it twice. Then I put my phone down. Then I picked it up again and typed, "Take care, Brooke." Sent it. Set the phone down and went back to work. There are things I understand now that I didn't understand that night at Vantage. She wasn't wrong about everything. I was being careful. I was moving slowly. I was playing a long game that looked like stagnation from the outside. The difference is, she mistook patience for limitation. She looked at the blueprint and saw a man who didn't dream big enough. She didn't understand she was looking at an architect. The project finished on time. We broke ground in spring. By fall the framing was up. By the following year, the building had tenants and a waiting list and a small mention in a trade publication that Hayden texted me a photo of at 7 in the morning. I stood at the corner across the street one evening. Looked at it. A whole building. Real floors. Real windows. Real people moving around inside. I thought about the rooftop dinner. The skyline. The way she said someone like me like I was already a category she'd filed away. I thought about it for maybe 30 seconds. Then I walked home. She wanted a life that looked expensive. I built one that actually was.